Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Directorial Watch, an AwardsWatch podcast that attempts to get in mind the cinema's greatest auteurs, explore what drives them, and maybe we go on a few unrelated tangents along the way. I'm Ryan McQuade, the executive editor here at AwardsWatch, and joining me, as always, is my co-host and my favorite bounty hunter, Jay Ledbetter.
Ryan, let's say the critics come after you and said maybe your last film, Man on Fire, was a little over stylized. What do you do? Do you maybe...
You make a Marvel movie?
Maybe go a little more populist. Now, how about you quadruple down and make a film called Domino? It's the Domino Pod.
I know.
This has got to be one of his kind of like lesser known films, lesser discussed films in many ways, but it's kind of the one that for me, the podcast series has kind of been leading up to.
Yeah. This is one
of the most interesting movies.
This is one of the more interesting movies we're ever going to talk about. And because
it's shockingly normal.
Well, it's also, should this movie exist? That's the question. That's the question the thesis of this episode is what we're talking about today. Should it exist? But somebody gave, New Line Cinema gave them the money in 2004. They released it in 2005, and that's what we're here today to discuss. We're here to discuss Domino, the latest film in our Tony Scott series. And we couldn't do this alone, Jay. We've not done any episode alone, and we're not going to do any episode alone on this series. We have a good guest here today with us. He was last heard on this podcast covering the films of Paul Thomas Anderson with us with Magnolia. He's the managing editor over at RogerEbert.com. It's our old friend Brian Tallerico. He's back on Director Watch.
What do Magnolia and Domino have in common? I think I might have the widest spread of Metacritic scores in the history of podcasts.
That might be. They do have they both have a moment in the middle of the movie where I sit there and I go, what the hell's going on? And I think it's...
how about audacious, indulgent?
Honestly, I was mostly kidding, but they're definitely kind of both about second chances and regret and LA movies. They're not that far off now that I think about it.
They're not that far off.
The big question, you were asking about questions for Domino. The big question is, what if cocaine were a movie? It would be Domino.
I did always wonder that myself, never partaking in it, but always just, seeing it in cinema. And yes. I think Tony Scott and Richard Kelly were like, you know what? Let's just write the screenplay while we're on it.
For a cocaine movie, surprisingly yellow.
Yeah. Yes. I was like, is Steven Soderbergh doing this movie? Is this got a little traffic in it? You know what I mean? It's that aesthetic of the time. But yeah, of course, we're talking about Domino. Had Brian come on here. Brian picked this a long time ago. He was super enthusiastic about... And I'm not being facetious. Usually I am, but he was dead on Domino. That's the one I want to do. And I was...
Need a challenge. Need a challenge every once in a while.
Can't just do 5-star easy layup masterpieces. This is like a half-court buzzer beater almost at times. But Brian, before we get into Domino, I got to ask you a couple of questions that I've asked everybody here on the show, all of our guests. And what is your relationship with Tony Scott? What do you like about him? What don't maybe you like about him? What do you miss about him? And I got to ask you the number one question, Brian, that I've asked everyone, and you got to give us a straight answer. If you can only choose one filmography, and this is your taste, whatever you choose is your vice here. Would you keep or would you pick the films of the Riddler, Ridley Scott? Or would you pick the films of the tone setter, Tony Scott? Could only pick one.
There's a lot of questions there. One question at a time here.
I'm just telling you.
First question. Relationship to Tony Scott. I'm an old, so I remember Top Gun when it was super famous. So I was there kind of
looking
from
good.
The beginning. Thank you. I remember Top Gun in theaters. I think that's probably the first one I saw. It must be, because I was 11 when that came out. I don't think I had seen The Hunger at that point, for example.
Your parents didn't let you take you to The Hunger Sunday matinee?
This thing was setting the box office aflame.
So Top Gun is probably the first. And then I had kind of a up and down relationship with Tony Scott. I still do. I think some of what he does is total nonsense, but I think I now admire more of his brash, unapologetic nature than I used to, because it's kind of so absent in modern American cinema. I mean, he didn't give no fucks. I don't know if we can swear in this podcast.
Oh yeah,
but like
you can.
And I think what's funny is that kind of like hoorah, no fucks given attitude in the Top Gun era is like, oh, you're annoying. I don't want to watch your movies. I'm going to go back to my film education. But now with everyone, with all the fucks being decided by studios and focus group to death, I miss people who gave no fucks like Tony Scott. And it's funny how that's kind of turned. So I think I've kind of come around to him more in the last 10 years than I used to. I mean, I always liked a few of them. I mean, Crimson Tide and True Romance made an impact almost immediately, and there's certain other ones that did. I wasn't quite as keen on some of the later stuff, although Unstoppable is a fantastic genre movie. I'm sure we'll get there eventually. And this one I like in Man on Fire. I mean, there's stuff throughout the career. But to answer the last question, Ridley Scott by like a million miles, but that's because I'm a big Ridley Scott guy. I love Ridley Scott. If you ever do Ridley Scott, I can do every single movie. I even like the bad stuff. I like Ridley Scott a great deal. And you know what's funny, for kind of similar reasons in that, but it's more craft with Ridley. It's like he doesn't care what people think. He's going to make what he wants to make, and he's going to do it as well as he can do it. So.
Well, we did have you on a while back. I think we had him on Blade Runner. We talked Blade Runner on the old show about that. That was the first time we ever did it. But we've been there. But you know, I
think that film is good.
We didn't talk about Exorcists, Gods and Kings. You know what I mean?
I can't really do that one. And
I can't. Well, you said any one of them, Brian, and we need the world.
An effort, but
a good year. A good year. You want to talk?
What's the one about the cop who lives in the apartment? What's that one from the 80s? What's that one called?
Which one?
Probably his most forgotten movie. I can't remember what it's called.
What about Robin Hood?
No, can't do that either. Okay, I can do like 25 of them. I'll talk to you for a while about the Kingdom of Heaven director's cut. I'll defend Last Duel. I'll defend House of Gucci. So let's go.
I'm a House of Gucci defender, so I'm with you.
Yeah. Brian, how were you last year when Napoleon came out?
I was not a Napoleon fan either. Yeah. And my review of Napoleon is basically, if anyone plug wants to go look it up, it's basically just like, this makes me sad. Like I really wanted to like I walked into that being like, I think in many ways it was like my most anticipated. Like Ridley Scott doing a historical epic with Joaquin, and it was just like, oh no, like it's not a good movie. I like Last Duel and House of Gucci significantly more. So.
Yeah,
so Ryan, I think the scoreboard on Tony versus Ridley right now is like 8-4 Tony or something like that.
Wow. Yeah, because
I mean we're on a Tony.
I was going to say a little
series,
bit of point advantage.
Yeah. Well, it really was. We were like the Tim Meadows band in Popstar. We were Tony for a long time, Tony, and then Sophia came in and she gave us. She said Ridley, and then I mean. A couple episodes ago, we've had a couple of Ridleys, and now Brian's going in the Ridley category.
Yeah, Ridley's on a heater.
Ridley's on the back half. He's coming.
I like them both. I like Tony. I really like. Ridley,
I think they really balance each other. I think that's the thing. It's like they were a great partnership, and I mean because they're brothers, and they're doing different avenues, and sometimes they would cross over. Like. I think a lot about this movie, and I think about, I wouldn't say that they're the same, but you look at in terms of the way it looks and commentary it's trying to speak about, and what each of them are fascinated post 9/11 or about the military-industrial complex or about America, about greed. It's they do have crossover themes, but they do it in such different ways, even if sometimes their films stylistically do look the same. They have distinctive styles though that make them special. Sure.
I also think that because Tony's gone, we can look at his whole career, so that's going to elevate his profile as he goes on. He's not making Napoleon right now to kind of lower him down a little notch there, and some people might have been close. And also I think historically, I mean, throughout most of their careers, one might argue that Tony was underrated and Ridley was overrated. So a podcast like this, guests are going to seek to balance that out a little bit, pick the more underrated of the two.
I feel like Ridley. Yeah. I feel like though of the later Ridley Scott films post Tony's death, The Counselor feels like Ridley trying to make a movie that his brother would make, in like the best way, not in like that's not a slap at the counselor. But
I love that movie.
Yeah, but like that Jay doesn't.
Scott movie.
Yeah, that feels like a Tony Scott movie, doesn't it, Jay? Like that's like
there are a few that are like G.I. Jane feels like a Tony Scott movie.
Yeah,
yeah,
you know.
I can see that.
There's maybe a couple others, but I bet they talked often. They probably exchanged ideas fairly regularly.
Yeah. So, how could you not? You're both, one was inspired by the other. They both got into this. They had a company together, for Christ's sake.
Tony wouldn't have made movies if it wasn't for Ridley. So.
Nope. And it helps when both of you.
He would have been a broke painter.
Well, both of them have made significant films over multiple decades. Singular films for different actors and their careers and everything.
And a wide array of quality within those careers.
Yeah.
So like you can pick out 4 or 5 great films in either filmography and 4 or 5 horrible films. So that makes them both interesting. Whenever there's that like diverse of an array of quality, I think people like to discuss and argue about it.
Well, speaking of quality and wide
perception,
we're going to go over to Domino now. We're going to talk about it because this is a movie that, if you look on paper, like this is the, if I do say so, this is kind of the Boston Celtics world champion argument, right? Everybody's talked about it over the last couple of days. It's like, isn't it an all-time great team? Well, if you look on paper, yes, but then you watch it, it's up to the eye, right? So on paper, going into this series,
Domino is the 2024.
Yeah, I'm not
Boston
sure. I'm going
Celtics. But hear me out. Here's where I'm going. Here we go. On paper,
Ramirez is Horford.
Yeah, I'm thinking so. No, that's Rourke. Rourke would be Horford. I'm thinking Edgar Ramirez is like a Drew Holiday, maybe. I don't know.
Dale
Dickey is who's the his Pritchard? Yeah, it's Pritchard just in the threes and the Anyway, Watkins
still a nonsensical simile to this point, but I'm willing to hear you out.
Hear me out. On paper, Domino, if you look at it, if I just presented this to an audience member that was going to listen to the show and go, why are they reviewing that? It looks like it is one of the worst reviewed films you can ever talk about. An absolute box office bomb. A movie that is been torn apart by so many people left and right. But again, it is to the eye of the beholder as to whether or not this is actually good or not, if it is actually bad or not, as bad as his reputation precedes. So that's what we are here to do today, folks. We are here to break down if I saw like in the low 20s or low teens on Rotten Tomatoes, this thing is the absolute bombs that this movie got left and right post Man on Fire, and the fact that it didn't make any money.
My brain's stuck on the Celtics comparison, but I think I'm just gonna have to let it go.
It's the inverse. It's the inverse of like on paper. It's the opposite. It's that one looks good on paper, one looks bad. But if you look at it, actually watch it, you have to determine that yourself. Because
this is like the Pistons who lost 14 games in a row, and us the day after the Celtics won coming on and saying, "No, here's how they played really well."
Exactly. This is
like
the difference is like the Spurs being like, "Well, we lost like 16 games in a row, but we have Wemby, and that's a pretty good promise." You know what I mean?
The Celtics were like analytically one of the greatest NBA teams of all time, and then they won the championship.
Yeah, but like nobody picked them to win the championship. You know what I mean? Yeah, but everybody doubted them. You know what I mean?
I think we need to move.
I think we need to move to Domino. And at the time, I mean, like this is him coming off of Man on Fire. So Brian, you picked this, all right? You wanted to talk about this. You wanted to talk about it. So I want to know why you picked it and why you like it, or maybe don't.
Okay, I do. I liked it. I remember, like, I think I picked it because I was defensive about it because I liked it almost immediately the first time I saw it. It came out in a time of like this kind of kinetic thriller. Everyone looking for this kind of dark, seedy. I'm not sure exactly what spawned it. There's a little bit of like Training Day, pulling back the curtain on a violent world kind of thing going on. There were a bunch of these movies at the time. And I remember so many of them being boring as shit. So many of them being like, hey, we're gonna yell at you for 2 hours and you'll fall asleep even while we're yelling at you. Like they had nothing to say and nothing to do and nothing interesting about them whatsoever. And I would have to say, no matter what you say about Domino, I'm never bored watching Domino. I just watched it again and I find it, I mean, it's got issues for sure. It's got way more problematic stuff than I remembered in terms of modern lenses. But that's a different time, I suppose. Although I'm sure that comes up with Tony Scott a few times.
It came up big time with Last Boy Scout, True Romance.
True.
It happens. You know?
It happens. He wasn't necessarily most PC guy. True Romance, I didn't realize until we're getting ahead of ourselves here. But what I didn't really realize until today was that it's basically True Romance meets Southland Tales. I mean, if you think about it, it's the odd reality TV, LA curtain aspect of Southland Tales. And it has almost the same arc as True Romance, including a shootout in a penthouse that ends the damn movie.
Yes.
I mean, it is so True Romance that I didn't remember it being that. Also, the like faux cool aspect of True Romance, the idea that there's that shot behind you, Ryan, of her smoking the cigarette and that being all you really need to know about a character. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, and I find that aspect interesting. The idea that he's like trying to riff on something he's done before. I always find it interesting when filmmakers do that, present something they've done before in a different light for a different era, because there was a long time between True Romance and this one. And yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I don't know if this was before we came on air, but like, no one's making this kind of movie anymore. No one's making this kind of like, fuck you, I'm going to make what I want to make. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to be loud. It might not be fully coherent. It's going to be so stuffed with plot. I mean, nowadays movies just drag on to 2.5 hours with almost no plot. This one gets overly ridiculous with a plot that can barely be followed. I was saying earlier, I think this was pre-air, that I'm 99% sure, as someone who covers TV, this would be a TV show now. They would say, take all that plot, add a couple of filler episodes, and give us a 7-episode Netflix miniseries. And that's what would happen. And to be honest, if we want to get ahead of ourselves even further, that's why this movie doesn't exist anymore. Because they're going to take that budget and they're going to turn it into an Apple Limited TV series instead of releasing it in theaters. Where
Man on Fire.
Man on Fire.
They're doing it right now.
Yep. And the mid-budget movie is gone. Like this kind of budget for adults is all Apple TV productions. I mean, let's look at Presumed Innocent. Let's take a 2-hour movie and turn it into a 8-hour miniseries, and it's just going to happen over and over again until I retire. Until I stop. The number of times I have written reviews that are like, this project is the wrong length. This TV show should have been a film. Like the idea that all screenplays can just be dragged out and turned into TV series. But again, I'm getting on my soapbox, but that's what would have happened to Domino now. So there's, believe it or not, even though it's almost 20 years old, it feels like a product of a different era. And in that respect, I like its chaos. I like its flaws, as crazy as that sound. I like its incoherency. I like that it doesn't feel focus shop to death. I like its cast of familiar faces. Delroy Lindo in this era, love everything he is in this era. I love its crazy, stupid diversions, like the Jerry Springer show for like 10 minutes. There's a full, long Jerry Springer show sequence in here for no reason at all, really. I love the Beverly Hills 90210 guys. I love the nonsense of this movie because too few movies nowadays feel like they're allowed to be nonsense. Everything is so hermetically sealed into focus group boxes that I feel like I'm losing my mind. And Domino may be quote unquote bad, but it's bad in a way that I miss.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said there, Brian. And so, but Jay,
yeah,
you said that we were leading to this kind of in a long way. This is one of the reasons why you do a Tony Scott movie series, is to talk about a movie like this, I think. And so I'm curious what you think of this movie, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing this movie for the first time shortly after it came out, I think, just on home video and being like, just why was a movie made like this? I don't understand. You know, when you're 15 years old or whatever and you're watching it, you're like, wait, this is, I don't understand why someone would make a movie like this. And now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, why doesn't everybody make their movies like this? It is to me, and you know, my takeaway from the film too was sort of like this is his 2000s true romance, not just because of the narrative and thematic similarities, but also because it is like Tony Scott's vision, or sorry, a upcoming visionary screenwriter's vision refracted through the lens of Tony Scott. Like Richard Kelly, I don't know why he's not allowed to make movies anymore, but at the time, he felt like he was going to be one of the, if not biggest, one of the most unique filmmakers of his era. And Tony Scott read Southland Tales of all things and was like, I like this guy. So if you're saying Southland Tales is what made me want to work with this guy, you expect to get something kind of akin to Domino. And I love that about it. I love the mess. I love the aggression. I love the combativeness. It's a movie that almost dares you to like feel anything while watching it. But I do think Tony Scott has this humanity that flows throughout the entirety of the film. I think the final scene of this movie is, while not nearly as emotional as, say, the ending of Man on Fire, it does for me sort of bring home Domino the person as opposed to Domino this heightened movie character. And I love that about it. It is just stylistically the audacity to be like, you guys didn't like what I did with Man on Fire. I don't care. I'm going to do it 3 times as much. It is. I was watching this with my wife, and she, you know, about 10 minutes in, she was on her phone, and I was like, okay, I get it. And then she went up to get water. Normally I'd like pause the movie for her, and she just looked at me and was like, you don't have to pause this for me. I don't understand why this looks like this looks. I don't like, I don't like this.
Nobody does.
And I get it. It is purposefully off-putting in that way. Again, it is just like daring you to like it. And there's something to appreciate in that alone, but also I think it adds to the potency of the film, where it's about these characters who it is daring you to like. And I think that really plays. I think so many of the performances are good. As incoherent as the plot can be at times, I think the broad strokes of it are fairly straightforward. And I'll tell you what movie this reminds me of, and it might just be the Warner Brothers of it all, and the meta narrative in it. Matrix Resurrections. There's a lot of Matrix Resurrections DNA in this thing, and I love Matrix Resurrections. So I like this movie more every time I watch it, and I'm glad I got to watch it again, and I can't wait to watch it next time. I love this movie.
It'd been a long time since I've seen it. I probably like UJ. I saw it, Blockbuster, grab it off the shelf. Probably
it looks cool. Like
on this,
coming on Pirates of the Caribbean as a bounty hunter.
Yeah, she's coming off of that and like what the King Arthur movie and everything. So she's like the star of the time. This is like, you know, kind of against that grind, but it's still a summer movie. And he cast her completely off of that. And I remember seeing this movie and then I kind of just forgot about it because it just kind of washes over you as a kid, where you're just like, there's a lot of things going on here. It's like Brian said, it's cocaine the movie, it's Adderall the movie. You need like
I
it's
don't
like a
like
drug.
how this makes me feel.
Yeah, it's like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? And the movie that I actually, while I was watching this go around, and what I got to really appreciate about going into this, and was like a good like gateway back into this early 2000s world of blockbuster filmmaking. I recently watched Bad Boys 2. And when watching Bad Boys 2, I was thinking a lot about this movie, just as the fact that the kinetic, confident direction, it has a style of its own. Obviously, I think Bad Boys 2 is a little bit more polished than something like this and not as brash, but still, that is a movie that is thorny and prickly for a franchise mostly that has down the road middle action movies, even especially with like the reboots with 3 and 4 and the first one. 2 is such an outlier in that franchise, and it is thorny, and it looks, and it's like just depiction of what's going on in America is fascinating. And I think that that's the kind of similar thing here too. It is, Scott examining the weirdness and the kind of dirtiness of how people make the American dream. He's done this many times before. And I love this sort of ragtag family of bounty hunters and bail bondsmen and counterfeit ID, girlfriends, and the intercutting between the FBI and the interrogation scenes. And there's her monologue, but then there's all this, there's like a second, there's like voiceover, but then there's all these subtitles, and it's kind of like they're in conversation with the two of them, and it's chaotic and it's messy and it's weird. And it also feels at times too of like how the Pirates sequels were made then at that point, where those movies start getting a hat on a hat on a hat on a hat to the point where you don't know what's going on, but visually it's at the hands of a director that knows how to, for lack of a better word for Gore Verbinski, steer the ship the right way in order to make a successful film. And then later on down the road, you try to make a movie like this, and they're not as stylized, they're not as interesting, they're super safe, they're showing you enough, but they're not showing you enough. There's a lot of things here that when I was watching, I was just like, this is a mean movie in a lot of ways, and I like that. I like that it's mean. I like that it's not trying to be safe. I like that it is just kind of what I think to answer your question, Jay, why Richard Kelly doesn't make a lot of movies anymore is because, like, he doesn't, one, he got put in like director jail for making a The Box, which is, I mean, like, it's not a great movie, but it's not a bad
Box.
Are you Team Box? No, yeah. It's like, it's an interesting concept. Like, he should get a television show.
Gotten something made.
Like, if Flanagan can get a show for like with interesting concepts, or M. Night Shyamalan could get tons of movies made, Kelly should. But I don't know, I don't know behind the scenes.
There's got to be many other reasons.
There's got to be probably
there are
about like the dude himself. But
yes,
it's just it's such an interesting movie for all their filmographies at the time. It's one still that, like, I can understand an instant reaction to being sort of like, I don't want this. Like, get this out of here. This is irresponsible to make, or whatever. You know how like people get all sort of like on their high horse about shit. And then 10 years, 20 years later, when we start talking about it, we're like, oh no, this is actually like good. And it's good because of its flaws, like you were mentioning, Brian. And it's fascinating to talk about those flaws. It's fascinating to talk about its thorniness, its prickliness that it has. It's not pretty. Not
it's
this
aggressive.
Yeah.
It's aggressive and intentionally aggressive in a way that constantly reminds you that it's a movie. And I mean that as a strength. The subtitles on the screen, the editing of images over images, the various film types, the voiceover. Like, it comes out at a time of like pretty deep sincerity in films like Crash and Brokeback. Those were the two of that year. It is, and like those kind of films, one might argue, oh, I got lost in that movie and I forgot I was watching a movie and I cared about the characters. Tony Scott will remind you you're watching a movie every 2.5 seconds. And that's very intentional. Like, it's but the Bad Boys 2 thing is a little bit of a hurdle for me. I admittedly haven't seen that in a while, but I find that movie more misanthropic and soulless than this one. But I could be wrong.
I recently watched it and I was kind of floored by it, because usually Bay doesn't go for, I don't go for Bay like that a lot.
He's generally more misanthropic and soulless than Tony.
Exactly. But I think it was, more sort of like, this does have something interesting to say in it, and I think it is.
Domino or Bad Boys?
Both. Well, I think they both have interesting things. Bad Boys 2, that movie.
You should have told me. I would have watched that again.
I'm sorry. I should have told you to put it on. You can put it on after. No, it was just like the movie I was thinking about, because like when I was watching those movies, when I watched the first one's just like a straight up Martin Lawrence comedy featuring Will Smith, and then these new ones have been like Will Smith vehicles. That one at least has them together, but it has, it has the thorniness and the prickliness of all the the drug trades and the government and the espionage and everything within a formula like that. Like it's at least,
that's not
I
just
think,
window dressing.
no, it's
not
just
shallow use.
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. I think it's purposeful, and I think it's purposeful for that generation of how people, how that, when you look back, and I thought back at the time, especially like there's college scenes and moments like this, and how Domino Harvey is like, and how this movie really depicts like our culture and how we consume certain things. And you shouldn't have gone like Monique going on Springer and thinking that's a better platform for her. Yeah, that's like, there's things like that in Bad Boys 2, and I was kind of like, I think that it's not like a call and response to those, but I was fascinated of like, again, movies that probably also shouldn't exist, that the studios gave over complete autonomy to the creative behind the camera and allowed them to make something that was considered vile by critics and some audiences, but one was a hit, one wasn't, because it was a sequel.
I'm still waiting for Domino for life.
Domino for life. I mean, you can tell
Ride or Die, Domino Ride or Die.
Tony got no studio notes on this movie at all.
No.
It's just like, why can we make it louder and more aggressive and annoying? Sure. Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, it is the so the movie was basically greenlit after being in limbo for. So Tony Scott actually knew Domino for over a decade. When
you can tell that the only way you make this movie is that maybe you know somebody that knows somebody,
and I think the thing about this movie is it has such an affection for Domino Harvey, which is what I think makes it kind of makes it transcend that really dark. Misanthropic. Oh, did I cut out for a second?
No, wait. No, I was just going to say, Jay, you're saying it wrong. It's Domino Harvey.
Domino Harvey.
Yeah, if you're going to say it right, you got to say it, because they say it 900 times in the film, but it's great.
They do.
No, but he met Domino when in like 93, I think, and then bought her life rights, and then couldn't get the movie made, and then Southland Tales came along, and he was like, "This is the guy to make the Domino movie." And it's just kind of a fascinating way to get this movie made. It was made by the producer of True Romance at the last second, kind of swooped in and said, "You can do it." And I imagine that they just said, "Do the True Romance thing." We didn't really get that when it came out, and it wasn't necessarily a hit when it was in theaters, but we've made oodles of money off of that thing at this point.
We can get walking again. Let's just get walking again.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Walken really did just become Tony Scott's like sixth man off the bench.
He's in Man on Fire. He kills it. He's in this, and he's hilarious.
Unbelievable in Man on Fire.
He's in full Walken impression in this movie though. Like just like shots of
I know,
like that. Like self
follow her. We need Domino. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Probably 2 days of shooting.
Yeah, it's probably just like it's like 2 days of shooting. He's on a ton of Red Bull. Just like let him go. He's just he's playing one of these studios exec. And I mean, to your point, Jay, it's like, God, Richard Kelly must really hate executives that he's had to sit in boardrooms and tell them no to ideas, because they're essentially like at the time of when reality television is about to start kicking in or has kicked in. And this is the next phase of it at that time, and Walken kills those scenes, and then he's so good in that. But then I mean, like Delroy Lindo
Lindo's awesome in this.
So good in this movie. So is Mickey Rourke too. This is before like the wrestler and his comeback and everything there. Like this era
of Mickey Rourke is the fucking best, man. This like when all these filmmakers would use him and like play into his failures, almost like play into what we know of Mickey Rourke. Like when you cast Mickey Rourke as a character who's getting a second chance, there's an added gravity to that, because we know Mickey Rourke was once the prettiest actor in Hollywood and then needs second, third, fourth chances. I mean, this whole movie's about second chances and shifts and changes, and I think some of that's a little underplayed, and I wish there was more to it. And honestly, if we want to get into some negative stuff, I think Domino herself is a little underplayed. As good as Kira is and how much he loves her, she doesn't really. I just watched it. I finished it like 2 hours ago. Like in the finale, she basically just survives a broken elevator. Like she doesn't really do much.
I get you that, because my wife was watching the last 40 minutes and she goes, "Oh, so she just got out of that elevator that went 60 miles an hour?" Like, and I was just like, yeah. She's like, is it? And she's like, I don't think you can make the argument like it's a dream or some crap like that. Like, it's clear that she, like, at the end, she's like, I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I fucked up. You know what I mean? And it's like,
yeah, and there's affection for her, but I do think there's a version of this movie in which she does a little more narratively. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's just a little thing.
I think I think the first 40 minutes is a Domino Harvey movie, and then the next is like, let's make a
shifts.
Yeah, let's shift into the team. Yeah, you know what I mean?
The reality stuff takes over a little bit. Monique gets a ton of time. Yeah, there's just a lot of other stuff going on, and kind of she loses focus. I'm also not a big Ramirez guy. In the right material, maybe, but I find him kind of lifeless here. I think that if you imagine a really charismatic actor in that part, this movie goes up a half star. Like, I just don't think he's. I'm not blaming him as much. I think a lot of directors don't know what to do with him, or writers, and I don't think he was given enough to do here. But Mickey Rourke, I mean, my God, Mickey Rourke can do more with a glance and just a dejected look than like almost any actor of his generation at this time when he was acting. I'm not saying he could do that now, but in the 2000s and late 90s, he was like the second chance king, and he adds gravity to this movie that would have otherwise been missing and is arguably missing in Knightley and Ramirez performances. I think Rourke and Lindo do some heavy lifting performance-wise to make this better than it would have been.
I gotta tell you, I was thinking about Rourke. I was just like, man, this era Rourke, watching this movie specifically, I was like, man, why didn't he and Tarantino hook up? Because I feel like that type of, you know, did they?
Rumors that they tried,
yeah, because it felt like he feels like a perfect candidate to kind of slip into that world in those 2000s.
And he's so good to work with. Such an easy guy on set.
Yeah, he's, you know, he's an old teddy bear, you know, that guy and everything. But no, I mean, like, I think Rourke's...
Yeah, he passed on Bruce Willis's part in Pulp Fiction.
Did he? Interesting.
Yep, that was the big one.
Great move, Mickey.
Yeah.
Right. Good for Bruce. That would have been something else. Yeah, good for Bruce, right?
But like, no, I think he's incredible here. Yeah, I do agree with you though on Ramirez. I mean, he's just kind of eye candy, right?
Their romance narrative doesn't
work. It doesn't work. And if it was with an actor with whom she had more chemistry or was like doing a little more with the part, I don't want to come on a podcast and yell about an actor, but lately when I see him, I'm like, there's just something missing there. And I do think it's most of the time, like I love Carlos. He's fantastic in that. Like, there's certain times when he can be really, really good, but like lately, I feel like if he doesn't have the right director, he kind of fades into the background a little more, especially in a movie like this. You can't fade into the background in a movie like this. You need to pop more.
Well, she has better chemistry with Rourke than she does with him, and she's supposed to fall in love with this guy. And there's sort of that tug and pull and everything, but like, yeah, I mean, like he's essentially eye candy, but I don't know. I mean, like mostly, I was telling you offline, Brian, and this is just the truth, but like, I don't think this is like any Keira Knightley performance we've ever had. And it's sort of wild that like she has become now like Miss, I'm going to be stuck in like a period piece the rest of my life. When she can go to places clearly that contemporaries are willing to go to still to this day. You know, and this is a showcase for like, I can put her in anything, even if it's underwritten, some parts of it and whatnot. She's willing to go there. She's willing to take risks. And I think Knightley has a presence from the beginning of it. And I think she, you know, I'm usually not the fan of the narration of sometimes of these things, but I think she, anytime she's on the screen, you can understand why Mickey Rourke goes, you know, guys are going to think that, you know, we're just a bunch of two dipshits, but you know, if we got her along, then like we're the coolest motherfuckers on the planet because we have this badass chick with us, and she's pretty great in this movie, and she has a great presence about her, and I think that she presents Domino sort of story really interestingly, and I mean
for sure.
I bought into her being like, because most of the time you see actresses and they're like, I'm going to be a bounty hunter, I'm going to be like, I was watching like a movie this year, like Civil War, right? And Kaylee Spaney And I love Kaylee Spady and Priscilla. But like I was watching her in that movie and I was thinking about her and she was just like, I want to be just like you, Kirsten Dunst. I want to be on the front lines and taking photos. I'm like, no, you don't. Like I'm like in my head, I'm like, no, you don't. Like
there's
like,
an argument that maybe that's the point.
I know, but like no, but like her as like an actress, I just didn't buy it. Like I didn't buy her as that character from the moment, regardless. And in her, I'm just like, oh, okay. You know, she can sell this to me. She can sell me like I can play.
She has an innate toughness to her.
Yeah, there's something. There's something.
She's an underrated actress, especially in this generation, in this era. I'm sorry, in the 2000s.
No, she's doing like Boston Strangler now, and she shouldn't be doing that. She should be doing
swallowed
other
up
things.
by the Joe Wright cinematic universe a little bit.
She has
Team Joe Wright.
I like Joe Wright, but
Pan.
No, not Pan. See, we always find the worst movie when I say I'm a fan of a director. Your brain goes, "What's the one I could challenge him on?"
Why not?
Why not? Wasn't in that one, was she?
Talk Atonement Forever.
No, that was Rooney.
Yeah,
Rooney
she wasn't in Pan.
No,
Kira Innocent.
No,
Yeah,
Kira
true.
was in Anna Karenina and Atonement, and Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice. Yeah.
Yes,
That's the breakthrough.
that's the
But
damn
yeah,
good movie.
she's when I say that Domino gets lost in the movie, it's not her fault. It's the script.
No. It's
She's, and if anything, that's kind of why the last 20 minutes are not as interesting to me, because it kind of gets too overly cluttered and incoherent, and you realize, oh, it's just ending like True Romance in the stratosphere.
I gotta tell you, this is just a pet peeve of mine, and it's in this movie, and it's like movies got to stop this idea of having romance sex scenes in a desert. Nobody has sex in a desert, and it just looks uncomfortable. And it's, you know, to quote Anakin Skywalker, it's coarse and it gets everywhere, sand. And it's just like, you know, like Marvel finally has a sex scene in Eternals and they're doing it in the desert. It's like, couldn't find a bed. Like, it's like, come on, what are we doing here? And it's
Ryan,
like,
we're talking about a man who had Tom Cruise play volleyball in blue jeans. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Again, I don't like that choice either. You know, I don't like that choice. I know it makes sense for the story, but it's also like he can change shorts like at a bathroom or something. Like he doesn't have to wear the jeans. Yeah. But then like, I love that it goes right into like Tom Waits as like this drug trip.
Tom Waits in the desert is the most. Hey, I got a scene from Southland Tales that I couldn't include.
I know. I was sitting there. I was just like Megan's like, is this like a drug scene in the middle of this movie? I'm like, hell yeah, it is. And it's Tom.
Take that scene out and put it in Southland Tales and not lose any.
It's great. It's great. Where are y'all on Southland Tales?
Big fan.
Big fan. Again, another movie that like it's just like,
yeah, doesn't give a fuck.
No, it does not.
Like, yeah.
The Rock has
probably got an even more kind of honed in point of view, as
Yes.
incoherent as some of that movie can be.
I watched that movie.
Really specific.
Oh, it's a better movie than Domino. I think Southland Tales is actually a great movie. I really
again,
like it.
I actually kind of think both of them are great.
Oh,
yeah.
I think this movie's kind of
Domino's
great.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad.
I watched I watched like the last 40 minutes of this movie with my wife Megan, and I literally explained her the plot of Southland Tales, and she went like, I think you are good to go and watching that one by yourself.
You guys had an hour and a half conversation about what Southland Tales is about.
Yeah, but like that's the great, you know what's so great about Southland Tales is like that, and I always find this funny. It's just like at that time, The Rock was doing interesting things. Now he's like, he then turned, he like that was that movie should probably, you know, kind of hurt you in the long run. Like people will pull that up, and they do kind of pull up the clips every now and then.
Oh, yeah.
But he's just like, his refusal to make something as interesting as like it's the Will Smith argument that you were talking about, Jay, a couple weeks ago on Enemy of the State, where it's like
in the Will Smith camp,
where he's
just refusing to do anything interesting.
Yeah, and now, you know, post that he hasn't, but now he's making the Safdie film. So like he's making that pivot to kind of like Smith is. But yeah, I think that movie's like crazy, and
I might watch that this weekend.
Yeah, I think
this weekend.
You know, Brian's gonna watch Bad Boys 2. We're gonna watch Southland Tales. We'll come back for a.
I actually meant to watch all the Richard Kelly movies again before this podcast. I just didn't have time.
Brian, maybe you know more than us, I guess, obviously about Kelly, but because he's like it's like the central focus. Like when we talked about Last Boy Scout, you have to talk about Shane Black, but and Kelly's fingerprints are all over this.
This is as much a Richard Kelly movie as a Tony Scott movie,
and that's okay, honestly too. But like, I don't know why.
No. I mean, the Richard Kelly version of this would be less aggressive, a little more surreal,
and I don't know if he gets the actors that Tony gets here either.
Yeah, that's why I think it's like 50-50. I think True Romance is a Quentin Tarantino and Tony Scott film, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Heard that. This one I'm not sure it's as 50-50. I think this is a Tony Scott movie. Kelly's ideas are here, but I don't think he would do the hyper stylized Nine Inch Nails video editing layer. Or the like where people say shit and he just puts it a subtitle for no reason whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
He was doing
he did it in Man on Fire.
He was tempting I'm telling you, he was just tickling the ivories with Man on Fire, and then he's just like, I'm going full in the deep end with this thing. And then
this is not gonna suggest he was on coke, but it's like, hey, let's amp things up as much as conceivably possible. He had a position of power here because Man on Fire made a lot of money, and he was just like, I can make something with no focus groups and no notes and no test screenings. And then it bombed like crazy. But and he had to kind of deal with that for a little bit near the end of his career, which sucks. But I remember by the time Unstoppable came out, like his brand just wasn't what it was like a decade earlier. And I think a lot of that was some of the fall of Domino. The fall of Domino. See what I did there?
Oh, God. All right. Usually that's
what a shame. His next movie only costs like $65 million.
70, 75.
Is that what it costs?
What's between this and Unstoppable?
Well, you have Deja Vu, which we'll be covering.
So he reunited with Denzel
and Bruckheimer.
He got the goodwill of Denzel back. Yeah.
Well, he goes back with Jerry, and he does
that Pelham remake, which is hot garbage.
And that's 110 million.
I think it's okay.
No, I think that movie's bad.
I just don't think Tony Scott has ever made a bad movie. That's my take.
The Fan and Pelham. I'm looking at the list right now.
Yeah, the Fan's not.
I don't like Beverly Hills Cop 2 either.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Beverly Hills Cop 2 definitely lesser, but
I can't do Pelham. Pelham
is trash.
Pelham's actually not Washington's fault. It's actually Travolta's fault. He's just not good in that role. And
that to me felt what this does not, which is like a paycheck. Like, I'm going to take some money to do a remake that they've had the rights to. So it was a for hire gig, in my opinion. And then this does nothing about Domino. No one's involvement feels like a for hire gig. No, it feels like, hey, let's get a little
sincere.
Desert. Yeah, exactly. So, and I think to circle back around to like why I like it, that's why. Because it's like, again, no one gives a fuck. Pelham is the opposite of that. Pelham is like, hey, we have got to keep our copyright going, so let's go make this nonsense. But anyway,
I don't know. Travolta seemed pretty into it.
Yeah, but like,
good or bad,
I don't know.
Definitely giving it his all.
Too, so whatever.
I'll tell you this about Pelham is that like that just felt like when I watched it, that feels like a movie that just shouldn't be remade because the original, but not because of the original. Because of just like modernizing it, like
right,
that's it's like trying to make
the cell phone problem.
Yeah, it's the cell phone problem.
Thunder from the Pelham podcast. I don't know if you're going to do Pelham.
We're skipping Pelham, so we can.
Well, the main difference is that the first one has a tactile grit to it. Has like hey, these are really blue collar people. You can smell the subway, you can feel the dirt. None of that happens in the new one. In other words, Tony's not really good at that kind of grounded tactileness. There's none of that in Domino. Like I said, it's always reminding you it's a movie. The original Pelham never reminds you it's a movie. It's trying to suck you into a real tense thriller-like experience. So I just think he was the wrong fit. Material.
But I do think though that making Pelham is the test run to then make Unstoppable.
I agree. Yeah. I think it inspired him to make Unstoppable, which, like I said, I think is a deeply underrated movie. I enjoyed.
That movie. I saw that movie 3 times in theaters.
I miss super simple, no nonsense. Here's the goal. Here's point A, point B. What needs to happen? Like, and go. Like I miss that kind of
And you
storytelling, that kind of action storytelling. Yeah.
putting Denzel with a good
Yeah.
superstar, with someone
Yeah,
with
the
good
good
chemistry.
The one
star.
thing I've argued over the course of the series is that a certain kind of movie died with Tony Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To a degree.
I mean, like,
I agree.
who makes Domino
Exactly.
nowadays? Like, name a
Well,
modern
Domino,
director.
nobody gets.
Nobody's going to finance. I mean, I did tell Brian, I was like,
I guess what's the closest thing, like Under the Silver Lake or something?
I was going to say like Harmony Korine, I guess.
No.
What
No.
you know what I mean?
But
Like
that's going
Spring
for something
Breakers?
very different.
And
Yeah,
Domino
Breakers.
cost 50.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like,
oh, give me a second here. What's the closest?
who
What's the
makes
modern day Domino?
Yeah, Domino Harvey.
Well, I mean, I hate to get on this soapbox.
You can do
but
it. It's okay.
We're in an era where bounty hunter wouldn't be the lead. In other words, we're in an era of
Yeah.
moral judgment of our characters. If they do something I don't want them to do, then it's a bad movie. And so I think that is one of the main reasons there are no dominoes. Domino Harvey wouldn't be deemed worth having a film made about her by the Hollywood system right now. In other words, people want to elevate less problematic characters than Domino Harvey. I think that's the biggest thing.
I agree.
Think, the moral weirdness that we're in right now, for lack of a better word, where the minute a character does something I don't think I would do or they should do, then it's a bad movie. And I think that's caused a whole lot of conservative filmmaking. So I don't know who makes Domino. I mean, there's certain people whose brand could make anything, like Quentin could make it if he wanted to.
Yeah.
But we're talking.
But it would
about,
be
like,
very polished though, as opposed to like this movie.
Sure.
Where, you know what I mean?
Well, he could make this.
he
He could do it.
No, he could.
if he
I just
wanted
don't. I just don't think. I
Honestly,
think
Hateful Eight is close.
to. It's similar. That was one of the
Yeah.
movies that came to mind in terms
Yeah.
of like,
just
an aggressive, no fucks given.
Bad
all
people.
All these people are bad people.
all these
Yeah,
people are bad
exactly.
people. Yeah, it's the. Well, it
Look
goes
at what
back.
happened to that critically. Look at what happened to that.
Well,
Like,
it
the
even-
number of people
yeah.
who didn't like Hateful Eight because they were like, I didn't like any of the characters, and I would go, that's the fucking point. You're not supposed to like any of the characters. Like that. That argument drove me slowly insane. Like, oh, there's some racist, bad, misogynistic, bad people in this movie. I'm like, yeah, and I don't think Quentin would disagree with you, but
Yeah.
that's not necessarily. I understand.
But that's what's interesting.
I'm still on my soapbox a little bit here. At times of great anxiety, as we've been in over the last 8 years, we go to entertainment for comfort. And I think Domino's not comfortable. So I think we need, believe it or not, I think
Oh,
the
no.
world needs to
Yeah.
become a better place for us to look at movies like Domino and for them to get made again. That's my super philosophical statement. When times in the world are tough, we usually go to films for escapism. And times are real tough and anxiety filled in the world, especially for the last 8 years. Not going to get political, but we all know what I mean. And so there's lots of anxiety and tension in the air, lots of divide. And so people want comfort from their films, even the films that are good and that people like, generally provide a little more comfort than Domino.
Yeah.
So I'm just raising a question in that regard. How does Oppenheimer grossing $1 billion fit into that thesis?
Because Nolan's a brand.
Nolan's a
And-
brand is part of it, but I also think there's as much as I love Oppenheimer, I don't think it's challenging any deep philosophical statements. I mean, I think it's brilliantly opening the box of mankind's problems. And honestly, you want to know the answer? It's because it's answering how we got to this anxious state we're in now. Oppenheimer is
Fair.
the how we got here success, not the. Oppenheimer is great, but I don't think it necessarily pushes anything philosophically. Do you know what I mean? It's not a divisive film, which I think is one of the reasons it made so much money, other than the POV argument. But it's not like, hey, the nuclear bomb was bad is a pretty agreed upon statement. You know what I'm saying? So I do think that, like, again, I love it. I think it's a phenomenal film, but it's not challenging us.
It's certainly not Domino. Certainly not aesthetically.
It's even thematically. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
The films that challenge us thematically lately don't make that kind of money. I mean, again, I love Barbie and I love Oppenheimer, but thematically, they're not complex in a way that most people would disagree with. You know
Killers
what I
of the
mean? Like I
Flower
said,
Moon is kind of that.
And that's why I thought it was the best movie last year. I think
Yeah.
Flower Moon like challenged things about the way we tell stories and the way
Makes you
we.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think that some of the issues people had with Flower Moon were by design in a
Yeah.
way that we don't really see that often anymore. When people talk about the tight POV of Flower Moon, I often come back with that's the point. It's about complicity. It's not a
Mm.
story of the native experience. It's about the white complicity and murder and genocide. And so naturally, and same with Oppenheimer. When people say we should have seen Japan, I go, well, it's about tight POV that allows us to not consider victims. So like those kinds of so in that sense that film does those films by master directors take chances that challenge us a little bit, but I'm talking like True Romance doesn't get made now, Domino doesn't get made now, I'm not sure Man on Fire gets made now, like this like
Not in the same way.
no, this idea of an aggressive protagonist, we've reached such a point in overcorrection in terms of we were in an anti-hero era there, especially for a long time on television and Sopranos and Breaking Bad and all that. And I feel like we overcorrected it. We overcorrected it in a way that was like, oh, now I have to like everybody and what they do. Even critics I admire are like, well, I didn't like that film because the protagonist did something I wouldn't have done. And I'm like, well, that's a dumb argument. Like
Well, yeah.
I'm not going with that. It's like if you don't believe they would have done that, that's a different story. But there's this sort of moral high ground that has seeped into pop culture that is really disconcerting for me. But I think it's because of the state of the world. And I'm hopeful if we can ever correct some of the issues with the state of the world, that we can get back to more challenging mainstream filmmaking.
Well, no, I mean, like, I agree with
Interesting.
you. I agree with you, Brian, because like last year, the movies I sort of gravitated towards or that were some of my favorite films of the year weren't like movies that I think regular audience members would firmly enjoy. I mean, like that's why I think like a movie like so many of us love Zone of Interest or even May December.
Zone of Interest was
all of
never
us.
going to make, a
Right.
ton of money.
It
but
made $50 million worldwide, which is more than what you would think that a movie like that would.
I think it's more than Domino made.
It's more than
it's
Domino
double
made.
what Domino made.
Exactly, and which
But again,
for a movie like that, it's also like that's a really tough movie
It also
to
had the
sell
Oscar
audience.
bump to it that helped it out.
It helped out actually internationally. It
critical
made a
praise,
crap ton
yeah.
of movie, internationally. And also it's part of the A24 sort of brand. I mean, those movies do make money.
again, I love Zone of Interest. I think it's a must see, and I think it's an essential film. I don't think it has anything particularly morally challenging. Like no one's walking out of that movie siding with the Hosses. Do you know what I mean? Like there's
No, but I
we
do.
know-
This is, yeah.
No, I don't think that that's the case. But I think that it's not about siding with them. It's about looking at again. I think that that's the thing about like both Zone of Interest, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer. They're not just about what
God,
we
this
see
is
on
a
the
good
screen. It's about. I think those movies are about then how history carries on, and how we then and now how our responsibility towards having a nuclear age, having
Yes, of
oversight on genocide, oversight on forgotten history, how we've treated. I mean, like zone. It's no secret that Zone of Interest coming out in the middle of everything going on between in the Middle East right now. Like it was the right time where people were like, oh, this feels so Zionist. I saw somebody on Letterboxd being like, oh, this is such Zionist, propaganda, da 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 da. And then they completely changed their position a couple weeks later, and it's because either that person misunderstood the point of it at the beginning of it, or they rewatched it and saw that it's much more than just about examining this family and everything. It's much more the long game rather than just the short game.
Yeah. I would say Brian brings up an interesting point as far as like, is the main theme of the last like 5 or 6 years of film complacency?
It is a movie. Sorry to interrupt, but it makes you lead trying to determine what you're supposed to think of its characters and its themes, which is, I think, what we're getting at is more. As much as I love Zone of Interest, I think we know. I think anyone with a minor education, sorry to your Letterboxd fans there, that you mentioned earlier, know what to take from that film. And I don't mean that as a negative. I'm just saying that, like, Breaking Bad, people still argue over whether or not he's a bad guy or a villain or not, or like whether we should root for him. This movie, you walk out of wondering if you're supposed to, how you're supposed to feel about the title character. Are you supposed to elevate her? Are you supposed to? I mean, yeah,
I do. I think more than most movies. I do think that I do think.
And what's interesting, and I cannot believe we're comparing Domino, Oppenheimer, and Flower Moon, but this is where we got. Those were my top two. Those were my top two films of last year, and I think in both those cases, I think the how am I supposed to feel about that character I just watched is an underrated tool in the filmmaking, the screenwriting lexicon that is increasingly underutilized. And Tony Scott was never afraid to show you character, and Ridley Scott in films like The Counselor, never afraid to show you characters that like, hey, I'm not going to tell you how to feel. I'm not going to put highlighters and roadmaps and neon signs that say this is a good person and this is a bad person. And honestly, in my experience, even as recently as last year with Oppenheimer and Flower Moon, those are the films that I find the most interesting, the ones that provoke debate over what the themes were. And again, I do think both those films are better than Domino. I want to get that on the record.
Nope, can't have you on the record with that anymore.
I think we're all going to go on the record on that one.
But I love that we got to the idea that the best films being made nowadays share the DNA of not holding your hand and walking you through a moral judgment of their characters.
I mean, a character, I was watching this movie and I was just like, who would in Hollywood, not even just like the Alf character, the driver from Afghanistan, post
a little sketchy.
No, well, I know, like who I was so shocked that they even got that greenlit. But even to more your point, Brian, like Delroy Lindo's character in the, and Monique and Macy Gray and those characters, they don't get made. They're not in the miniseries of this nowadays. They're not in the movie nowadays. Because they're prickly and they're not good guys. They're not bad guys. There's too much moralness in there that I think that people would have to. Their character and their character types. You know what I mean? Yeah, and you know what I mean, and everything. But yet at the end, when she hands the $300,000 to Monique rather than giving it to Delroy Lindo, it's like, oh well, that's the right way to go. Even though they completely don't, Delroy's in the hospital with them at the end, and they completely don't talk about any of that, and it's, which is fine, but it's
all that stuff's a little cheap, like a little manipulative.
But it's again, it's part of the. Well, yeah, it's all part of like the hat on the hat plot at the end of the movie, and rather than what the first half of the movie, which is about this.
It's actually the stuff. It's the stuff in the movie that goes against what we're talking about, which is it's the, hey, look, they're all good, they're doing it for the right reasons kind of shit, which I'm not sure the movie fully needs. I mean, if they did get a producer's note, that's probably where it was.
I think they got it.
I don't know that the producer's note was let's have one of the great victories of the movie be sending millions of dollars to Afghanistan in 2005.
That,
I suppose that's true.
I think I think one of the
character's so cheaply sketched, and like a joke for a while, and then turned into the.
I think that's
kind of
the point.
Making fun of a character for a while and then making them the victory lap sentimentally always kind of bugs me a little bit.
I think it's
such a bold choice in 2005 that I can kind of get behind it.
Yes, I can see that. Yes. But I always have an issue when a character's been the butt of a joke then becomes the heartstring puller.
Or also like kind of the mastermind.
Yeah, that always bugs me. Both ways.
I think that the one thing though that I would push back on you, Brian, is it's like by the end of this movie, the way that final shot of her like in the pool, and she basically seems like she's semi-retired. She got away with it, and she's like, "I love you, Mom," and everything. It's like no, I think that not intentionally, but maybe that was where the note I think came in, where it's like we need to have the nice ending that True Romance has, rather than when True Romance has the alternative ending where it's where it's not with the kid on the beach. You know what I mean? And everything. But other than that, I mean, like
I think that feels so Tony Scott though. That's
what the final.
Yes, I agree.
I love you, Mom.
Him to get away in True Romance too. I do think that's Tony. Tony is as kind of cynical as he can be. There's that undercurrent of wanting his characters to have a happy ending. The characters he likes the most.
Oh, I mean, the cynical stuff and the funniest stuff in this movie is having like Brian Austin Green and Heinz Earing in here, like playing themselves and like literally being the butt of their own jokes.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
No, I know.
And how they got away with that.
I would have loved to hear those conversations, especially when like they're so constantly ripping on themselves. Like, I just want like, how much were they in on the joke? Did they expect it to be like that, or did they just get pages that day? Like, I'm just always wondering like how that came about. That would be a good interview.
And it does kind of have this aura of sort of the last action hero thing where McTiernan was making kind of a parody of the movies that he made. This is sort of in many ways a parody of a Tony Scott movie, which is interesting. And at the same time, kind of like, do you deserve to make this movie a little bit? It's like so meta critical that it makes you kind of question his motivations for making the movie in the first place. But again, I find that fascinating to talk about and think about, which is something that in so many movies that are made for $50 million and supposed to have mass appeal, just you can talk about them for 4 minutes and then the conversation's kind of over.
Give me the divisive shit. Give me the stuff that makes people mad. Give me the ones that people argue about. I will take that any day.
It's the movies that we can talk about for hours on a podcast rather than like 15 minutes and then we can get on with our lives. They're much more interesting. Do you guys have anything else you want to say or talk about real quick on Domino?
The extended Jerry Springer scene is insane. The fact that a major film that's 127 minutes basically goes on Jerry Springer for a full 6 or 7 minutes. It's a long time.
It
is unreal to me. Like, that's the one that I'm like, I can't believe that actually happened in a movie. And what's funny is it feels like a diversion at first because they haven't really set up the Monique character that way. Mm-hmm. So it literally feels like, oh, I'm just going to take a break for reality TV and talk show for 5 or 6 minutes when it unfolds. But yeah, that's just the one note. I was like, I can't believe this is actually happening.
And the crazy thing is, if you had told me it was like a deleted scene from Bamboozled, I would believe it.
Or any number of movies. I mean, that's the one where like the producers had to be like, does this need to be this long?
Does it need to be in here? Like, what's the point of this, Tony? Like,
she could have set up the kid stuff with a exposition dump line. Like, we don't need the whole Jerry Springer sequence.
Or it could have just been like a clip rather than like a they cut to her and it's
or like a commercial, like this week on Jerry Springer.
Exactly. Yeah, like a TV spot rather than like the whole episode. Yeah. Because it's that scene is just like it's an interesting way to present oneself in the culture of how one describes themselves on a resume, and which was kind of funny when I was watching, because it was like, well, there are a lot of people that would identify as certain things like this, but they would not be as brass as this. You know what I mean? There would be a
reality TV too.
Yeah,
it gets the
she's playing to the camera there too.
Yeah, like, well, that's the whole movie kind of folds in on living life in front of a camera and what that means. Once it becomes way more of that in the back half.
The danger of that,
the bounty hunter stuff, because the bounty hunter show becomes more prominent and admittedly a little underdeveloped. I mean, I'm here to be pro Domino. I do think there's a better version of this film that like has a better male lead, that has a tighter back half where she does more, that digs into its themes about reality TV more. But the reason I wanted to do this is because I walked out of this press screening being like, hey, let's talk about this. And most people I know were like, fuck you. Fuck you. So the fact that I'm like, yeah, it's a solid 3-star B movie. I think it's enjoyable, and in the light of how it never gets made anymore, maybe even better than that. I've been waiting 19 years to do this, guys.
No. Well,
what do we haven't talked about at all. What do you guys think of the framing device? The Lucy Liu, Keira Knightley, piss yellow interrogation.
It gives her more time. It gives her more time to develop, which I think makes it a little important. Because she's so underdeveloped. Like, I think without it, she'd almost disappear entirely into the movie. Because she gets those scenes with Lucy that develop her personality a bit more. In general, I hate that kind of framing device, but I'm trying to think, if you take it out of this movie, an already thin character becomes see-through.
She becomes a side character.
I also think it's so well acted in a vacuum that it's engaging and good.
Yeah,
they have great chemistry, the two of them
Yeah.
together. I mean, if the point is to be this by the this buttoned up cop, FBI agent, and her, and then it's supposed to be tantalizing. It's
also a little bit of an anchor in a movie that's fucking on choppy waters.
True.
So like it keeps taking us back to something that we can hold on to.
It settles us down for, like, if you're an audience member, even for us, it is to then
catch your breath.
Kind of catch your breath, watch her take a cigarette, answer a question, and then we go right back into the chaos.
Keira Knightley's just so undeniably appealing in this movie. Like, despite all the stuff she does and the situation she finds herself in, especially in those sequences, I'm like, I want to give me the series. Let's see the sequel. Let's see the Domino sequel. But I'll tell you
anything's possible nowadays. Man on Fire show, Domino the series. Who are we casting as Domino?
Domino, probably Anya Taylor-Joy,
Jenna Ortega.
Oh my God, guys.
One of those. They're the biggies. It's probably Jenna Ortega. I'll tell you one thing. This
Hunter Schafer
movie is riffing on Ocean's 11.
I would watch that. I'd watch the shit out of Hunter Schafer's Domino more than Jenna Ortega's, but I don't want to get people mad.
It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
This movie riffing on Ocean's 11 hard at times, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about Soderbergh too.
Because of Vegas.
Not just because of Vegas, just the way that there are certain moments that it is trying to give off this true sense of cool, I think, in the same way that an Ocean's movie is, but it's juxtaposing that with this insane violence that we're experiencing.
Feels like Ocean 7-11.
I don't know if that's fully intentional, but it's just like
right.
where the culture was at the time. But
Jeremy J?
No,
I didn't hear it.
Don't repeat it. Don't load. Just let it sit.
I'll listen to it. I'll listen to it later.
Also the reality, the countering of 90210 guys with Mickey Rourke in a van, like it's a bit like deconstructing the cool of Ocean's 11. Like, hey, these guys are cool, think they're cool, but I'm gonna blow a guy's arm off in front of them. So
it's like the poker scene of Ocean's 11, except a guy gets his arm blown off by a shotgun.
Oh, I love that. I love that scene. Oh my God. Because it's again, like, I love it too, because as cool as we are presenting these characters, they're these bounty hunters and they're tough as nails. When it's take off his right arm, all three of them look at each other like, are you going to do it? Am I going to do it? Like,
take off his shirt under his right arm.
Yeah.
It's a very convenient cutting out of the phone.
Of the phone.
Kind of like the magical elevator.
It's kind of like
conveniences in like half of this movie.
I'm telling you that when the two when they're like, I love how Mickey Rourke's like, we need celebrity hostages. We just need them. And then they go into the stand and they're like, yeah, well, they thought that if you brought celebrity hostages in here, you wouldn't kill anyone. And the guy's like, well, maybe you guys should just go on downstairs. And
apparently,
like,
people don't kill people when celebrities are around. Is a good line.
That's really good. And then like they're just like reaction shot in it, and it's done through like a camera that you would find like, on like a Undercover Cop or something like that, in the elevator is honestly is a great moment in this movie, because I was like, okay, I know what most of this movie's going for, but that's pretty on the nose, and yet it's still really great. The fake out of the when it starts getting in with like the mob and the sun and all, and it starts getting.
That's where we got a couple episodes of the Apple Show that need to be developed. Like, all that stuff is, if you think about it, it's all totally incoherent. Like, it doesn't make sense.
We haven't even mentioned the fake ID college kids.
Oh my God!
We haven't even said R.I.P. Dabney Coleman yet. We're like an hour in.
Oh yeah, we haven't mentioned him at all. I loved seeing him.
Yeah.
Oh my God! No, there's.
How about the Sam Kinison monument? That rocks.
I rewatched it today. I rewatched it today, and I put it on Letterboxd. One of the most movies ever. There's just most.
Indeed.
It's just there's a lot going on here.
There is a lot going on here. All right, guys.
All right.
Jay.
Yeah.
I don't even know. We're going to do this segment anyway. We do it every week. Jay, before we get out of here, we're going to test your award season knowledge based on the movie we just reviewed, which was Domino. And it's a segment we like to call It's an Honor to Get Nominated. Jay, I think we all know the answer to this question. Jay Ledbetter, was this nominated for any Academy Awards?
Yeah, I think Dabney Coleman got a supporting.
Yeah.
In my alternate universe, yes.
Macy Gray got a best original song. Right.
Macy
we didn't talk
Gray.
about the first
No, we
ladies
didn't talk
either.
about
A
Macy
clear
Gray,
play on
no.
Point Break.
Yeah, that's a clear play on Point Break. Also, just
stuff rocks.
I remember when Macy Gray, when like she showed up and I was like,
that's like the
God.
the fourth switcheroo, the fourth reversal.
Man, I'm telling you, watching this movie, and then if you watch, what is it, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, I was like, man, Keira Knightley loves to be in a movie with incoherent like twists and turns. It's just incredible what your agents can find for you on a page. Jay, any Oscar noms? No,
absolutely not.
Yeah, absolutely not. No, this movie, no. Would you guys nominate this for anything?
MTV Award, Best Kiss.
Oh, this has it. Oh, you mean for the kiss? Or like where? When they're in the sand making love?
Yeah, of course.
Of course. No, I don't think so. I mean, most editing, I might give it.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
I don't think I could do it without sounding like a complete troll. But the editing is,
it's something.
I will give you the best editing noms for this year. And I think you would consider throwing them all pretty much out to maybe replace Domino. So film editing the winner was Crash.
Because of the pick match for so long. That happened forever.
The winner was, or the other nominees were Cinderella Man, The Constant Gardener, Munich.
Oh, okay.
And Walk the Line.
Music scenes. It's music stuff and
boxing,
fighting stuff. Yeah. I don't know if I'd put this over any of those.
I don't know. I kind of just
maybe
like
Walk
it.
the Line.
I kind of
remember Walk the Line like at all.
Exactly. You remember the editing of this movie. That's
exactly
for sure.
Right.
That's the thing about Mangold. It's like Mangold makes good movies, but then you kind of don't remember them.
Nope. And I'm not sure I agree with the first half of that sentence.
You know what? You know what's just so crazy about Tony Scott is in a world where we appreciate like meticulousness and no stone unturned. Tony Scott is doing this like hand crank camera where the whole appeal is the unpredictability of the overexposure and the underexposure.
Again, he reminds you you're watching a movie at every second. The second you might be like, oh, I'm really invested in what's happening here, he's going to drop a subtitle on the screen or overexpose something or go slow motion. It's like constant reminder that you're watching a film.
Play a needle drop a couple of times over and over again. Yeah.
For the record, I don't think James Mangold is that bad. I just took
no. I know, but it's just
I don't want him to get mad.
It was a layup right there. It was a layup.
Well, Brian, how you feeling about the Bob Dylan movie? That's been a common talking point on this podcast.
I'm a little concerned, but I
think that's the consensus.
I generally like
on
to talk about things before they come out. I like to give things the benefit of the doubt. We don't do that often enough, but I would be lying if I was said I was excited. So we'll see.
I mean, Brian, we've seen the same shot of him walking across the street like 900 times. Like I don't know.
Do love that still.
I'm telling you, if that movie's not just like a walk and talk of him just going across the street, I have no faith in that movie whatsoever.
It's Elle too, right? Elle Fanning.
Yeah, it's Elle Fanning.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't have it. It's not
like
nothing
Elle
against
Fanning, her sister was in Man on Fire.
It's not. It's got nothing to do with Elle. It's the fact that like that movie shouldn't exist because we have I'm Not There and we're good enough. We don't need to touch Bob Dylan ever again. Please, thank you. Like,
I think in general, the music biopic is maybe my least favorite narrative genre.
It's
that's where I'm at on that.
It's made by the guy that then they had to make hard or walk hard because of his movie. Right. Like it is. It's like we can't think that that's actually going to be a good movie. Then at that, I mean, like hopefully it is. Maybe it is. I don't want to spend. I don't want to be spent. Listen, I don't like spending 2.5 hours in a movie theater and hating
I want everything to be good.
I want everything to be good. Yeah,
I wanted to see if Brian perhaps wrote a Back to Black review, but he did not. However, it did get a 1.5 star review on Rodrigo.com. So
it did. I edited that review and enjoyed it, but I will never see that film. Ever. There's certain films that I can put in a box and know that will never cross my path. And that's one of them.
Is that one of them from this year? The
The
Bob
Bob
Marley.
Marley one. Never gonna see that
Yeah,
movie.
that's one. I've heard some stuff about the needle drops in that one, and it is
Yeah,
funny.
never gonna see that movie.
Well, they just
Like,
all
there's
come
certain
from the.
genres. Honestly, bio, doc, and pick are both my like least favorite things right now because they're so poorly done. So, and generally, just they're both lazy 99% of the time. So it's always great when you see a great one, but very, very rare. If I watch another doc with people telling anecdotes about someone famous who's not actually being interviewed in talking head format, I might jump off a bridge. Like,
Or another
remember that
doc
time when so
produced
and
by
so
the
did this?
subject
I
of the
might
movie.
jump off a bridge. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like the We Are the World documentary from earlier this year
That
and
was
stuff like
okay when
that.
it got granular, when it got like into the studio and talked about what they did that day. I'm talking about like, and I don't want to name names because I don't want to make anybody
Say
mad,
it.
but like we've all seen talking head docs that are literally just anecdotal. Like, hey, remember when so and so, usually because they're dead, was in the studio and recorded this song? That was great. Wasn't it great? They're all Chris Farley show. Remember that? That was awesome. Like that, remember that? That was awesome approach to the biodoc is driving me
I
mad.
mean,
And then
the
that
one recently that I thought was passable only because I'm so obsessed with the subject was probably the Jim Henson doc, which
Yeah,
was
I haven't
very
seen that
much
yet, but I do
that.
like Jim Henson.
I
But I'm
did.
glad to hear that broke out of that a little bit. But so Jim Henson is such a
The Steve
creative
Martin one drove me
force.
nuts.
That was okay. I
That
like Moon
one.
Age Daydream. I like a
Well,
film
yeah,
that
because that's
when
just taking a chance.
well,
Yeah.
it's also like trying to capture what makes the subject worth talking about
Yes.
instead of just anecdotal stories.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, it's I know that they're great. That's why I'm seeing this. You don't
Also,
need to
exactly.
tell me.
expressionistic.
Yeah. Exactly. Jay. Point taken. Um, Brian, thank you so much
Always a
for
pleasure.
coming back on this wild show. Kind of kept us mostly in line today. We've been kept
did.
in check the last couple episodes, Jay. It's we haven't gone.
Yeah, we
on
really
long.
have. I remember the first time we podcasted with Brian, I think he was like, well, the cool thing about podcasts is you can talk about all the
Tangents.
stuff not related to the podcast. And I was like,
Yes.
you know what?
I was like, yes, it is. Yeah. But we kept ourselves pretty much in check today. Brian, can you tell everybody out there where they can find you and all your work on the internet again? And we usually do a recommendation for the week. So if you want to tell everybody a movie that you're really like high on, doesn't have to be new. It can be something old for people to go catch up on other than Domino. Just let us know. Let them know.
Most of my stuff is at rogerebert.com. That's where I'm the managing editor. I've got stuff there pretty consistently. I'm also consistently at Vulture, mostly doing streaming guides, best stuff on Netflix, Hulu, etc. Occasionally doing some features. I'm doing a feature. I'm currently working on a feature that ranks all 15 Illumination movies, believe it or not. So
Oh, wow.
Having
that's
fun?
a thing. Yeah, having something. But that's a thing people can read. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to go back through the history and see how it's developed over. It's been 14 years since the first one.
Are those
That'll
Sing?
be
Are
up.
the Sing movies really high up there?
I have not determined rankings yet. I will say Super Mario Brothers is going to be low enough that people will be mad at me. So we'll see how that goes because that movie sucks. Anyway, and you can find me at the playlist pretty consistently, and then I freelance here and there at various outlets. A movie I liked recently. I don't know. We're doing at Ebert next week, although it'll be like 4 weeks ago when you read this. We're doing best of the year so far, like at the halfway point. And I was trying to like consider films that aren't on the list that I think people should see.
Mhm.
Really small movie called Seagrass that played at TIFF last year and came out earlier this year that literally no one has talked about that I think is pretty excellent. So I'm going to throw out VODing Seagrass. Anyone who
Okay.
can find it.
All
All
right.
right. Got to check that one out.
J Dog.
Yeah, you can find me, Letterboxd, J Ledbetter, Twitter at Mr. J Ledbetter. Any writing I'm doing, podcasting, AwardsWatch. And my recommendation of the week, I've kind of exhausted all the good stuff I've watched recently on the pod. So I'm just going to say we're rewatching Twin Peaks right now. And
Nice.
Ooh,
I
nice.
think that is one of the best things that exists. So
Agreed.
it's
Are you
the
doing
best.
the original and the return? Or
Oh yeah,
just...
we're gonna get there. We're still in season 1 right now, the latter half of season 1, but yeah, I'll do the whole thing. My wife,
Should-
weirdly not a fan of the return, but our marriage has survived nonetheless.
Because it's a little too surreal? Or, I mean,
Yes, she's definitely gets a little weirder. There's sort of a template she can grasp onto with the first one,
sure, of course.
and then the second one kind of abandons that.
Oh, absolutely.
I think she
Well,
has
the
a
first
harder time
season of
with it.
Twin Peaks, especially, is basically more traditional.
the
History.
template for the next 30 years of entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Ryan McQuade77. You can find most of my work over at AwardsWatch.com. If you like podcasts, we do one every Monday. It's the Awards Watch podcast. iTunes, Spotify, 5-star reviews. Sign up for the newsletter that's on the website. It's the best place to get all the news, reviews, interviews, podcasts all in one place. And my recommendation for the week is going to be one of the best movies that's come out this year. It's by the time this is out, like Brian said, this should be out in theaters. And it is a movie I saw actually last year at South by Southwest. Luke Guilford did a movie called National Anthem. Nice. And I think it's a wonderful coming of age, queer love story over the summer. And I think, Guilford's direction about and setting in this small sort of rural New Mexico town, about, this 21-year-old who's kind of lost and discovers a community of queer ranchers and rodeo performers. It's such a beautiful movie, and one that feels like, honestly, like it could be cliched, or we've seen it 100 times before, but there's, I don't know, such sincerity to the filmmaking and specificity that, I don't know, it really grabbed me. I can't wait to watch it again. But it's it's one of my my favorites of the year so far.
Agree with that one.
And
good call.
I hope everybody goes and sees it in a movie theater, because it is because Guilford is a photographer, and that movie is gorgeous to look at.
We hosted the Chicago premiere at the Chicago Critics Film Festival in May last month. It was one I was very happy to program. So
yeah.
We played it right before a film. I'm gonna throw out one more. I'm gonna cheat. Ghostlight. Ghostlight is fantastic.
Oh, Ghostlight.
And Ghostlight was our closing night, won our audience award. Ghostlight is great. Ghostlight is a wonderful little human drama kind of movie that too rarely gets made nowadays. Sincere and beautiful. And is a similar, this is coming out in late July. Go see Sing Sing too. Go see Sing Sing when it's in theaters later
these
this
small
year.
movies
I
with
see
simple
all these.
Small movies with simple concepts, but really tug on the heartstrings in a beautiful.
I'm gonna promote my fest. We opened with Sing Sing and closed with Ghostlight. We played National Anthem right before Ghostlight, so we had a hell of a fest this year.
Wow,
yeah, good job, Brian.
It's good stuff.
That's
love having Brian on the pod. One of my favorites to talk to on the pod.
Yeah, so, we love you, buddy. We love you.
Thank you for coming back. We must be doing something halfway right anyway.
Yeah. Who's next? Who's after Tony Scott? Or are we not revealing?
We're not revealing just yet. We'll reveal off mic to you.
Because I got a claim. Well,
if you want to claim one, we can get you on one.
We've definitely got some sort of controversial late period films from legendary filmmakers that you could lay claim to if you want.
Depending on the filmmaker, I will likely be able to defend. So.
Next week's show is the penultimate episode of the Tony Scott movie series. We're going to be, it feels like we've already done this episode, actually, but we haven't, because it's deja vu is what's on next week's show. So thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.